What's up, guys, and welcome to the Blues and Stripes. Finally going to do a video like this because I wasn't able to do it last season. We're going to take a look back on the season as a whole, and I would like to start doing videos about some of the transfers and transfer rumors going on for the club, but because I don't have a whole lot of time, I can't do it daily or whenever new transfer news drops. So I might just have to do kind of some updates throughout the summer, maybe every week, maybe every couple weeks, kind of just base it on how much time I have that week and whether or not I can work on getting a video out just to talk about some of the stuff that has happened in that time or some stuff that is rumored that could be happening pretty soon. But for now, we're going to focus on the past. What has gone on this past season? How have we ended up? Well, obviously, we've ended up pretty well. And to be perfectly honest, it's not something that I was expecting at the beginning of the season. I was definitely looking at the season very concerned after everything that happened with Pochettino, everything that happened with Maresca coming in, some of the players we got rid of, some of the players we brought in. There was a lot of concerns looking at this season as a whole. I did make the comparison early on. I said Maresca might be Potter 2.0 because there were a lot of elements about it. He's a young-ish manager. He's fairly new. He's only had success at a lower level. We even brought in Dewsbury-Hall, very similar to how we brought in Cucurella from Brighton whenever Potter came in. So there were a lot of similarities with Potter that had me concerned going into this season. Thankfully, Maresca did turn out to be better than Potter overall, and I do think this young team is starting to mature as well. So there were a lot of elements that I think really helped this season turn into what was ultimately a good season, even if we did have that December-January blip. But I thought a couple things I could talk about were maybe some of the highlights of the season, some of the low points of the season, the turning point on both the good and the bad side. And so we'll start with some of the negatives. I think the low point of our season, for me personally, was the 2-2 draw against Ipswich at home. Going into that game, we had seen a little bit of a turn of our fortune. We'd won some games, granted against lower opposition, but we had done enough to start to give ourselves a chance to maybe stay in that top 5. And I think playing at home against Ipswich, especially since we had lost to them earlier in the season, which was really embarrassing, but being at home, you kind of had the feeling of we should be getting this win, almost kind of getting revenge for what happened whenever we went and played them at their place. And instead what we saw was what we had seen throughout that long winter period of just slow, dull. Yes, we turned it around in the second half, but it just did not feel like the team was really buying into what the manager wanted. There's even that moment whenever Sanchez kicked the ball long from the goal kick, and obviously Maresca had his say about that. But it just felt like that almost doomed our Champions League chances. And thankfully that turned around, and I'll talk about that in a second. But for me, that was the real low point for our season, and it's when I truly lost hope for Champions League happening. But I think looking back, the turning point from where our season went from good to bad, I think it would have to be that first Fulham match. You look at the Everton match, it's not a terrible performance, it's not a terrible result. Getting a draw, even if it is 0-0 at Everton, is difficult. But the Fulham result at home, when we're up 1-0 for most of the match, and then just to so sloppily concede 2 late goals and lose, I think that's where I started to feel concerned. I started to feel like things might get worse from here. And sure enough, that was the start of our long run of bad results. So for me, that's another kind of low point in our season because it's what kicked off a lot of what happened afterward. And I also do want to throw in one final mention of the game for me where Maresca lost my trust, and that is the Man City result. Not the first one of the season, obviously. The second one, when we were at their place, we go up 1-0, and we are not comfortable, but we are holding them off. We're doing a pretty good job. But then Maresca makes the decision to take Jackson off and put Nkunku on. First of all, that's where the game was lost. Because as soon as he does that, now Ederson is just free to just ping the ball over the top. No trouble whatsoever. He sets up the next 2 goals that win the match because Nkunku doesn't press like Jackson does. So if you're going to take Jackson off because he's not having a good game or whatever, you have to put somebody on who can put pressure on the keeper, and Nkunku's not going to do that. So for me, Maresca got all of his, not just tactics throughout the match, but he got his subs so wrong, and he's what cost us the match there. For the rest of the season, I saw some moments where he made some good decisions, some moments where I felt like he kind of lost some matches or lost the plot a bit, especially when it came to some of his lineups as well. But that Man City match is for me where I finally decided I don't think Maresca's got what it takes to take us forward and be a successful manager for the long term. Now, obviously, he did enough to get us into Champions League and to win us the trophies, so we'll talk about him in a bit more detail later. But for me, though, those are the 3 matches that defined the bad points of our season. But now let's talk about the good stuff, because there are a lot of good things to talk about this season. I think personally, the high point for me is that Nottingham Forest win on the final day. And I know it's kind of simple to say, like, oh yes, the win that got us Champions League, but in reality, looking at the match as a whole, even looking at some of the decisions Maresca made, it was a good, well-played match. It was well set up tactically. I think we handled our job well. We pretty much nullified Forest for at least the second half. We did give them a few too many chances in the first half for my liking, but definitely after we got the goal and then we made the switch and brought Lavia on, that's where the team as a whole really looked a lot more mature and looked like they were very comfortable, even being in a hostile environment where Forest are pushing to try to get a win out of it. We did our jobs. And it's the first time this young team truly looked like they were comfortable being mature and holding down a result. So for me, that was the high point outside of just getting Champions League. There were a couple of turning points because obviously we started the season a little rough, had a couple of losses and draws here and there. And then obviously after our winter form, there was a turning point for me that saw us get back into the Champions League race. I think the first turning point for me at the beginning of the season was the Newcastle match where we beat them at home. And I know we went and lost to them in the Carabao Cup shortly after, and then a couple of embarrassing draws, in my opinion, against Arsenal and Man U where we could have taken it to them because they were both on the wobble. But ultimately, I look at that Newcastle match, and that's where we looked comfortable. I know Newcastle didn't start the season well, but we looked comfortable in that match. We created a couple of good chances, handled our business pretty well. And outside of that loss in the Carabao Cup, that was kind of in the middle of our long unbeaten run in the league. But that's where I kind of felt like, okay, we do look pretty good here. We had some good wins after that too. I think the Southampton win was after that, as well as the Aston Villa win. There were some good wins in that time. While the Wolves and Brighton wins earlier on were good, there were still a lot of gaps in the game. I think Newcastle, for me, looked a more complete performance as far as what we would eventually see, especially in the later parts of the season. But as far as the turn that got us back into the Champions League race, I would have to say that has to be the Fulham match, which is ironic since the Fulham match is where I think it turned for the worst earlier. But the win at Fulham, it was just such a good feeling. It kind of gave us a little bit of hope. It was a last gasp, just like they did at our place. We did it at their place. There's a lot about it that I think gave the team a feel-good factor that set up for what was the final part of the season and ultimately saw us get Champions League and also win the Conference League pretty comfortably. But now let's quickly talk about Maresca, because obviously he's not going to lose his job after the success he had at the end of the season. But for me personally, I'm still not fully convinced. I feel like there are some issues that need to be addressed, because while there definitely was improvement by the end of the season, I don't know how much of that was his doing and how much of it was the players just deciding we're kind of done playing this way. I mean, Sanchez, the goal kick against Ipswich that I already talked about, that was him just saying, you know what, we just tried to pass out of the back. Look what happened. We nearly got scored on. Let's go long. And then we get scored on, and Maresca almost kind of doubled down and said, see what happens? Almost ignoring what happened right before when we tried to play his style. But the thing is, after that point, I didn't see Sanchez trying to play stupid short passes anymore. Whenever he was under pressure or whenever it came to him, he looked to get it out, which made him look a much more solid keeper by the end of the season. So I don't know how much of it was him wisening up and how much of it was just the players deciding we can figure this out on our own. We don't have to play this way. And him just sort of accepting that. Because I will say, it's not like all of the games were flawless. You look at how we started the matches against Newcastle, against Man U, against Betis. We started those matches playing similar to the way we played during the winter period when we were on a long run of bad results. It was very slow, it was very dull. The way Maresca wants to play, if we're not moving the ball quickly, we typically end up just going backwards with it. Eventually going to give the ball away or just have to kick it out under a panic and give it away that way. Now, granted, in most of those matches, we did turn it back around in the second half, and he did make some good subs. But again, how much of that is he looked at it and said, hey, this isn't working, let's change it. And even if he did, why are you still then continuing in the next few matches against Man U and then against Betis in the final? Why are we going back to that style when it's not working? So it's very much up in the air. He could turn things around. He could change how he wants to play. It's very hard to tell based on some of what he says in press conferences, because sometimes it is funny Sometimes he does make some funny statements, and then sometimes I do get pretty frustrated because I don't know if what he's saying is matching what he means. Because as many people pointed out, he was telling all the people that wrote us off and said we were too young to make Champions League to F off, even though earlier in the season he was saying we were too young. I know you're saying for the title race and all that, but still, your whole thing was we were too young. We're not ready for it. And then when people were saying the same thing about our Champions League run-in at the end, and he even said at one point the Champions League was not the goal, we're ahead of schedule. I don't know. It's very hard to tell what he means sometimes. So could he change the way he wants to play next season? Could he change stuff around? Absolutely. But I don't know for sure that he's going to. He seems very set in his ways. He seems very stubborn. He is a Pep disciple. So it feels like we're going to continue to see this style of play that hasn't worked for half of this season. And that's why I'm unsure about him as a manager and whether or not he's going to succeed at Chelsea. But I will say, the way the season has ended, I am much more willing to give him time now compared to about halfway through when it felt like Champions League was not happening and I wasn't even confident we were going to win Conference League. But now I'm more so feeling, give him some time. If he can't figure it out, then he needs to go next season, because we do have a young squad, but our squad is growing. You can see the maturity that's there. It's starting to finally get to that point. And if Maresca is not going to also grow and learn from the mistakes he made this season, then I feel like the squad's going to be held back because of him. And I don't want to see that happen. But on the squad, we are going to talk about all the players and give them a quick ranking on a tier list, which this will be the first one that I've ever done in a video. So let's hop over to that right now. All right, so I will quickly go over this and just sort of explain my thinking on the tiers and stuff. First of all, you will see all the players down here. This is just for my own OCD brain, but I've organized them by goalkeeper, defender, midfielder, forward, or wing and then forward, all based on numbers. That's just how my brain works. These 5 down here were players that were just on the tier list that I downloaded. It was like a blank Chelsea 2024-2025 tier list. Didn't have Chalobah on it for some reason, but whatever. But these 5 are all players that didn't play more than 10 games. So I don't feel like I can really even rank them. But as far as the tiers are concerned, needs more time. These are for players that they did play some, but it was really hard to get a sense of whether they're good enough to be at Chelsea or not. Some of them it's because they're young, they're youngsters, they need more time to develop, they need more time to grow. But there are also some players that went on loan in January that I feel like could have possibly benefited us a little bit or might benefit us in the future, and I feel like we need to give them a chance and see what more they can bring to the team. The rest of these are all for players that we've seen plenty of them, we know what they're capable of. Not good enough kind of speaks for itself. They're players that I don't think should be at Chelsea anymore. I don't think the Premier League or top Premier League quality, and I think they just need to be moved on. The rest of these 4 tiers, I will say these are all players that I think should stay at Chelsea. I do want to see them stay. I don't want to see them sold, but needs improvement is obviously they need to get better. If they're going to stay, if they're going to be a long-term Chelsea player, they need to get better because this season just wasn't good enough. Mixed bag kind of speaks for itself, but they've had ups and downs throughout the season. They had good moments, they've had bad moments. Basically, the differentiation is needs improvement means they had more bad moments than good moments. Mixed bag, it was about 50-50. Solid season means that they had more good moments than bad, but they still had those bad moments that kept them from being a 100% great player for us this season. And then best of the best, I mean, that's obvious. It's the players that had the best seasons. They were the standout players for us for this year. So starting off with goalkeeper, Sanchez. So I think I'm actually going to pop him into mixed bag season because he did start kind of shaky. He had some moments where he looked good. He made some good saves, but the mistakes were there because Maresca was trying to play that out of the back system that he's not comfortable with. And then, of course, he hit a bit of a rough bump where it felt like even his shot stopping wasn't great. But I think by the end of the season, he showed what he's capable of whenever he didn't feel constrained by a system. He's a decent keeper. I don't want him to be number 1 next season. I think everybody can agree with that. But I think he proved by the end of the season he is capable of being second string to Petrovic or a top level keeper that we're going to bring in. I think he's capable of that, as long as Maresca isn't going to force him to have to pass out of the back. Jorgensen, I'm going to have to put in needs improvement because he had a decent start, played some good games in the Conference League, but I think we saw there were several matches where he's just not good enough. Whether it was the Morecambe match where, yes, we didn't give up a goal, but not because of him. He kept dropping crosses. His handling wasn't good enough. The Aston Villa match when he played, just not good enough. Let a ball like squirm up under his hand. Should have been a lot stronger there. He doesn't command the box very well either. So there's just a lot about him that I feel like he needs to get better if he wants any chance of being here. And especially because we do have so many young keepers, we have plenty of other opportunities. I've heard good things about Mike Penders coming through. So unfortunately for Jorgensen, I just don't think this season really gave him a lot of hope for the future. But it's not like he was awful all season. He had those moments that showed he is capable of getting better. So if those moments can improve, that's good for him. Disasi, I mean, that should be obvious. No question there. Cucurella, also same thing. No question there. Best of the best. Best left back in the league by far. Nobody comes... Okay. Not going to go that far with it. But he has been one of the best left backs. I know Kirkez and Robinson had great seasons. Cucurella should be mentioned. There are quite a few pundits who are not giving some of these Chelsea players the credit they deserve. So whenever I'm seeing all these teams of the seasons that are coming out and Cucurella is not even being talked about, and another player that I'll mention in a little bit, I feel like there's some bias going on there. Tosin, I'm going to say mixed bag. He started okay, and then it was just kind of, he was in and out. He played well in the Conference League. I'm not as convinced by him. I know a lot of Chelsea fans were saying he had a great final couple of games. He had a great game against Forest. Everybody was praising how well he shut down Wood, and he did for the most part. Maybe it's because I'm a bit more defensive-minded, so I'm more critical of defenders. But there were some times whenever players are making runs into the box, he's just not aware of it. And there's another defender I'll talk about in a second that has the same issue. I feel like that's kind of a general Chelsea defense thing that needs to be worked on. But Tosin is one of the more guilty parties, in my opinion. Badiashile, enough said. Colwill, I'm going to put him in solid season. I was pretty critical of him at times throughout the season because, again, I am much more critical of defenders. And there were several moments where it felt like he was making the same mistake that he had made multiple times before. But I think by the end of the season, I was not having as many issues with him. I don't think he was phenomenal by any stretch of the imagination, but I think he was good. I think he was very comfortable in defense. On the ball, he looks very comfortable as well, which really helps in Maresca's system. So I would say overall he was solid. I would still like to see him improve some, and I think if we get a top quality experienced center back end that he can learn from, like a Silva, I think that would be phenomenal for his development. Overall, good season for him. Chalobah, I'm going to say the same thing. He did have a couple of matches where he wasn't at his best, but when he came back from his loan, I think he was really, really good. In my opinion, he looked our best defender for the second half of the season when he was here. I know they're going to try to get rid of him because of PSR and all that. I just don't think it's a good move. I think he is a very good defender. I think if you keep Colwill, Chalobah, Tosin, and then go get one experienced center back, that's 4 really good center backs. And you got an experienced one that can teach these guys, because Tosin is not young. Like, I think he's 26, 27 now. So he is definitely the elder statesman in the team. But I think if you get one that maybe is right at 30 or something, you get a guy like that who has experience and knows what he's doing. He could really lead the likes of Colwill and Chalobah and get them to the levels that I think they're very much capable of. James, I'm going to put mixed bag, because it's not necessarily all his fault, but the injuries definitely hurt him. And as much as I hate to say it, I think the end of this season, his form was so good. But if next season, if he gets injured again at any point for more than a couple of weeks, I just don't see that you can rely on him. There are a couple of players in our team that are constantly injured that we'll need to talk about as well. If we can't rely on him, we need to start looking at other options. Do we need first of all, another leader in the team, since James is the captain? Do we need to get in a right back who's going to be more comfortable there and is going to be able to do it more consistently as well? Because you look at like Cucurella played almost every match. He was hardly not available. We need somebody like that on the right side as well. And unfortunately, James this season did not show that physically up until the end of the season. Gusto, I'm going to put needs improvement. Obviously, I was not very kind to him over the past couple of matches and my criticisms and all of that. But yeah, I mean, he didn't have a good season at all. And if not for the fact that he's young and he did show in his first season here that he had some quality, I would be putting him in not good enough. Because based on this season alone, he doesn't look good enough. Maresca either needs to change how he's utilizing him, or Gusto just needs to step up and realize, I have to change the way I'm playing. Because that can be it sometimes too. You can learn how to play slightly different, even if it's not your strength. And I don't think Gusto learned any of that. This is going to be my most controversial take based on what I'm hearing a lot of other Chelsea fans say. Fofana, not good enough. And not just because of the injuries. I do not think he's as good of a defender as everybody makes him out to be. I talked about Tosin losing track of runners. Fofana, for me, is the worst out of all of the defenders at that. He is so bad defensively when it comes to his positioning, when it comes to tracking runners into the box. There were so many moments in our first run of games whenever he was in the team alongside Colwill. People were praising that partnership, but I'm watching and he's just not aware of anything happening. And it's why we were winning games, but we were conceding 2 goals per game almost. I think on the ball is where he's probably the most comfortable in Maresca's system because he is pretty solid there. But when I look at him defensively, it's very similar to like a Kepa situation where Kepa on the ball looked fine, but as a keeper, he was not good. He wasn't making good saves. His positioning in the goal and his foot movement was awful. Fofana for me is very similar to that. On the ball, he's fine. So it works in a system where you're trying to pass out of the back. But defensively, if you're going to have a team that's constantly running at you and is going to be putting crosses into the box and a striker making good runs in, Fofana's not going to help you because he's not going to read the situation well. For Achimpong, I'm going to put him in needs more time. I think he was very close to being solid season for me because he did look good in his appearances in the Conference League. And again, this is not, needs more time is not the worst of the worst on the list. This is just I feel like he had some good appearances, some good moments throughout the season, but I still think he needs a bit more time before he's ready for this level. He looks physically pretty comfortable. I think he still needs to learn a bit, maybe getting some substitute appearances or maybe some appearances against like relegation sides. I think might help him, but he's definitely one that I want to see more, and I want to see if he can grow to what we, I think, are all expecting of him. Vega as well, I'm going to put down there. He had some good appearances, but it definitely felt like he wasn't happy with basically being used only in the Conference League. Now, the couple of times that he did play in the Premier League, I was not really impressed by him. I think the pace of the Premier League is a little too much for him at the moment. But when he was playing in the Conference League, I think of all of the fullbacks that we have, he looks the most comfortable inverting into the midfield. And I think it's because he has played that role before in another team. But I think unfortunately for him, because he's not quite up to the pace, it's why Maresca was not comfortable using him in the Premier League. Like I said, I think he was unhappy with the time that he was getting, which is why he wanted to go out on loan. So whether or not he's going to come back next season and be involved, I'm not entirely sure. But I would like to see a little bit more of him because I do think he could be effective for us going forward. Fernandez, I'm going to put him in solid season because I think overall he looked good. He wasn't one of the best midfielders in the league, but I think he had more good moments than he did bad. He did have some matches where it felt like he was just well off the pace. He wasn't quite keeping up with everything, but then he had some matches where he looked really good. He's breaking in the box well. I think I'm finally starting to see why everybody was saying he needs to be further forward. When he first came in, I saw him as kind of a Fabregas type of midfielder where he'd sit deep and maybe look to spray the ball out wide and knock it around really well. But people kept saying Pochettino wants to use him more forward. He plays more forward for Argentina. He looks better when he's getting forward. And I didn't see any of that. Anytime he got within like 5 yards of the box, I thought all of his brain cells left his head. This season, he looks a lot more what everybody was talking about from last year. That player, that midfielder that's breaking in, your Lampard type of player that's getting up and down the pitch and finding the net, getting himself in good position to have a shot at the top of the box. He was doing so much of that. And I do think I want to see a little bit more from him next season, but I think this season definitely showed he is capable of playing that position. I know there's a lot of rumors about whether or not he's leaving. I wouldn't mind him staying at this point and seeing what more we could get out of him next year. Dewsbury-Hall, sorry. I appreciate all the work he put in the Conference League. I appreciate the fact that he probably knew that was his level and was happy with that. Gave us some good minutes to run out his legs and put in a good effort, but he's just not good enough. He probably should have stayed at Leicester. And I'm not saying Leicester would have stayed up with him there, but I think he would have been a lot more comfortable in that team than he was playing for us. Caicedo, I mean, I'm putting him slightly ahead of Cucurella. I know I'm not really organizing these much, but I just wanted to make sure everybody knew he is the best player that we had this season. And this was the other player I wanted to talk a little bit about because nobody is putting him in team of the season for some reason. It's always Rice, it's always Gravenberch, it's McAllister, it's Tonali. I really don't think a lot of these pundits watch Chelsea. If you watch us play, you'll see how good Caicedo is. And what's weird to me is because they talk about statistics as well. What statistics are they looking at? Because I actually compared in a previous video on my last channel, I compared the stats of Caicedo to Gravenberch and Rice, and his stats are mostly better than theirs. His and Gravenberch's defensive stats, he's better in most all the categories outside of, I think, successful duels and I think interceptions. But he tops it in tackles, he tops it in tackles per match, he tops it in tackle accuracy, tops it in successful 50-50s, aerial duels won. His passing is better than Gravenberch's as well. Rice pretty much only tops him in the attacking stats, but that's because Rice gets up the field more. So I don't understand how people are not at least talking about him. It feels like even when they talk about like, oh, I put Rice and Gravenberch, but McAllister was close and so was Tonali and so was Tielemans. I'm like, how is Caicedo not your third choice then if he's not going to be one of your first two? It's just really bizarre to me, and it really makes me wonder if they are just biased against Chelsea and are maybe just biased, oh, he's the most expensive midfielder, so of course he should be good enough. I don't know what it is, but it feels weird that he is not being talked about more for the individual season he had, because even in the games where we were not good as a team, he was still very effective. He was the one keeping us from getting embarrassed in most matches. Going to Lavia, I'm going to also put him alongside James in mixed bag season for the very similar reason in that when he played, looked pretty good. But unfortunately, he was injured for most of the season. It's really hard to say whether or not we can rely on him, and especially knowing that we've got a couple of midfielders coming in that look like they're going to be really effective for us next season. If he's not going to stay fit, then we don't really need him. And as much as I would like to see him continue to play, because again, I thought he had a couple of really good games at the end of the season, I just don't think we can rely on a player that's going to be constantly out injured. For Neto, I'm going to put mixed bag. He's very close between mixed bag and needs improvement for me because he had some good games. Obviously, the goal against Fulham, that was a big goal for the team. And he also stepped into that false nine position pretty well. But I'm just not seeing enough from him overall to be happy with that business just yet. I'm glad he stayed fit because that was definitely something I think a lot of people were worried about was, is he going to stay fit since he was so often injured last season with Wolves? But thankfully that wasn't an issue. But his performances on the pitch, there were some games where he's working really hard. His work rate is impressive, but the quality at the end, the crosses, the shots, that's where it felt like he was lacking from him most of the time. Because even when he's putting in crosses and putting them in dangerous areas, it's not to anybody. It's just a dangerous looking cross. And maybe with a better striker, with better box movement, maybe that'll help us in the future. But ultimately, it still just feels like right now we needed something a bit different, and he didn't really give us that. But that's why I'm putting him in mixed bag over needs improvement, because if the team around him improves, maybe he will look better. So maybe it's not him that needs the improvement, it's the movement in the box. Just kind of my thinking there. Mudryk, I know this is also going to be a little controversial. I mean, I was not convinced by him anyway. Whenever he first came in, he had a couple of decent matches, but his overall performances were not good enough for me to be excited to see more. So personally, I just think we need to move on from him. Now that he's involved in this whole controversial thing, I think it's just time. I know he's got a long contract, so it's going to be a while before we can just let him go. I feel like we've got to move on from him and get some better options in there. Madueke needs improvement. He, for me, if you've watched any of my videos on my previous channel, any of my reviews, you'll know he is one of my least favorite players right now because of his selfishness and how many times he makes bad decisions on the ball and continually does it. So he's very close for me to just not being good enough, but he does have quality. I liken him to a Callum Hudson-Odoi, where Hudson-Odoi had so much talent, but I felt like he wasn't figuring it out. He wasn't quite figuring out how to fit in a team like Chelsea. And Madueke is kind of the same way. Looks good at times. He does some good stuff on the ball, but there are times, especially whenever we play teams that have the low block, he's not as effective trying to dribble through 5 players that are all within 5 yards of him. He's not really capable of doing that. He's best whenever it's kind of a 1v1 against the fullback and he's got space to get in behind him. Like, that's where he looks a lot more effective. So he's got to figure out that at Chelsea, he can't do what he wants to do for most games, and also figure out that it's not always about scoring. Sometimes the assist is just as good. So for me personally, it's very close to not being good enough. He does have enough quality. If he doesn't improve next season, I'm definitely going to put him in not good enough. But for most of the season, even though most Chelsea fans were still praising him, even in games when he wasn't doing much of anything, I think overall, you look at his stats, you look at his overall performances, he just has not been good enough for us this season. Sancho, for him, it was going to be needs improvement, but after the news that came out today when I'm recording this, apparently going to go back to Man U. And for me, that's disappointing. I felt like when he ended the season, I was disappointed with Maresca because once Sancho started scoring and assisting, granted, most of those games were the Conference League, but he had not been playing well for 5, 6, 7 games in a row. He hadn't been scoring, he hadn't been assisting, he had not really affected those games. And yet Maresca kept starting him, kept playing him because Madueke was hurt. But my opinion, I'm thinking we could move Palmer out there. We could try George out there. We have some other options we could do instead of just playing Sancho, who's been useless. Well, then Madueke comes back, and in that match that he came back, Sancho, I think, scored and assisted 2 of Madueke's goals, and then Madueke starting every match from then on. And Sancho came off the bench against Ipswich, scored the equalizer, got another assist and a goal, I think, in the Conference League, and then got another goal at some point. He just started turning it on a little bit. Meanwhile, Madueke, after that first game back in the Conference League, didn't do a thing. It looked dangerous at times, but that was it. So I was disappointed with Maresca for not realizing, okay, Sancho's finally found his form. Let's start him over Madueke, who's not giving us anything. I was actually excited to see, okay, maybe Sancho can become the player that we're hoping he will next season. And then coming to find out, apparently he's not wanting to take a pay cut at Chelsea to be here. For me, that's just disappointing. And it shows he's not here because he loves the club. He's not here because he's a boyhood Chelsea fan. He's here because he wants money and he wants to play at a club that wants him, but still wants the money more. And it's just really frustrating that that's the type of player he is. He'd rather stay at Man U and make the 200-something thousand a week that he's on currently and not play or get loaned out again to some other team than to come to a team who's probably going to play him, maybe not first team based on some of the performances we saw, but give him a chance and maybe take a pay cut, but you're going to be playing at a higher level. You're going to be in the Champions League too. But no, he'd rather stay and make more money. And that, for me, that's his ambition then. That's the type of player he is. And frankly, I mean, I'm disappointed because, like I said, I thought he ended the season well. But I think ultimately it shows that's who he is. And I think for us, it's beneficial to know that. So that way we don't spend money on him, spend $25 million on him and start paying him. For him, though, it's going to be detrimental to his career, in my opinion. Probably spells the end of him as a top level footballer. I could see him being another Jesse Lingard, and he's going to end up in some lower league tearing it up there. I don't even know if Lingard's tearing it up in Korea. I think that's where he is. George also needs more time. I think he's also pretty close to having a good season this year, but I think ultimately, especially since Maresca wasn't willing to even use him in the final few matches, I think it shows he's still a little ways away from being in this first team. I think he's got a lot of quality. He's got a lot of drive as well. I would love to see more of him, but for now, needs more time, I think, is appropriate. This one also might be a little controversial, but I also think Felix needs more time. I know a lot of Chelsea fans are ready to write him off. They thought his first season here was a joke. They think this year he wasn't that good. Personally, every time I watch him, I feel like he can get better. I feel like he offers a lot to the team. His work rate is great. I think he's got a lot of quality on the ball. I personally thought, because they were looking in January, who are you loaning out? Who are you trying to get out? I don't understand why Nkuku stayed and Felix didn't. And I guess I can go ahead and put Nkuku in not good enough. I mean, Nkuku was not giving us anything. He wasn't working that hard. He doesn't fit Maresca's style. He doesn't fit that hard press, try to win the ball back type of player. He's also playing out of position for most of the season at 9, and he needs to be playing 10, which I know Palmer's there, but Palmer's not going to play every match. He can't physically do that. Most players cannot. So you're going to need another 10 to back him up. And I thought of the two, Felix made a lot more sense. He fits Maresca's style more. He's much more clever in the tight spaces where sometimes it can get a little clustered with all the players that will be in there trying to put pressure on the number 10. I don't understand why Felix is not being given more of a chance. It has to be something behind the scenes because every time I watch him, I'm thinking he looks a good player, but the fact that it seems like he might be falling out with managers every so often, it might just be his attitude, might be something he's doing on the training ground, maybe he doesn't train hard enough, I don't know. But personally, I would like to see him given more time and given a chance to see what he can do as another number 10 option for Palmer whenever he's either injured or just not. I mean, we saw he kind of went on a little bit of a bad spell. I think Felix would be a good option there. Palmer, I'm going to put him on solid season. A lot of people saying he dropped off second half of the season, and he did, to be fair. But I don't think the drop-off was as massive as everybody made it out to be. I think a lot of people have already pointed out he was still creating chances. His expected assists was really, really high. So I think overall, still had a good season, still had a good solid season, and showed a lot of his capabilities throughout the season, especially in the final of the Conference League. He showed really what he's capable of. So hopefully Maresca can put aside a lot of what he wants to do tactically and realize the type of players that he has, because I think Palmer was restricted a little bit there, but hopefully Palmer can kick on next season and we can see him return to the form that we saw last year. Nicholas Jackson. So obviously I've defended Jackson a lot in my past reviews, even though I might be the only one doing it, but I'm going to put him in mixed bag season. I do think he dropped off second half of the season. I think once he came back from injury especially, he really looked like he wasn't quite at the same levels that we saw him earlier in the season. But I think there's a lot to his game that people ignore because he's a striker, because they expect strikers to just score goals, and that's the only job they have in the team. But I do feel like, especially how Maresca wants us to play, the striker cannot just be a goal scorer. He cannot just be a guy who puts the ball in the back of the net. He's got to have other facets to his game, because whenever we're out of possession, we need somebody who can put good pressure. Whenever we're in possession, we need a striker who's going to help us in the build-up play, because we're not just going to go long all the time. I think we do need other options up there. I think getting Delap in is a good option for us, and I'll talk about that when I get to transfers that have already happened for us, and whatever that's going to happen for video. But I think Jackson, he's a good type of striker to have in games where we are going to be maybe pinned in a little bit more, trying to break out quickly, trying to get in behind high lines. I mean, I think we saw against Tottenham. People will talk about, oh, he's offside all the time. There are some times that he does make the run a little too quickly, and I think that's something he'll learn the more he does it, because he's still young. But also, I do think the players around him need to start finding that run a lot quicker, too. I think that's why he and Palmer link up so well, is because Palmer sees that run before he's straight offside and can get the ball to him, whereas there are a couple matches where Fernandez or Madueke or Sancho, they see the run a little too late, and so he's already straight offside. Whereas if they had been aware of that run before they received the ball and played it in first time, I think it would have been the perfect pass for him. So all that to say, I think some of the criticism against Jackson and some of the Chelsea fans that want Jackson just gone, I think it's a little unwarranted. I think it's a little harsh on him. I think he needs time to grow, and I definitely think he needs competition. That's not something he's had. He's not had anybody that's been trying to fight him for that spot. And I also do think we need other options just for the matches whenever he's not going to be as effective. You know, he's not great in the box. So if there's a game where the other team's packing it in, and we know they're going to pack it in, and we're going to have to send in a lot of crosses, he's not going to be effective in those matches. You get somebody, I don't know if Delap is going to be that striker either, but I think you get a striker in who is good at making runs in the box. I think they're going to be more effective in those matches. So he gives us some more variety in there, and we're not just having to try to throw Jackson in and say, hey, go do this thing that you're not good at yet. But anyways, moving on. Final player, Mark Guiu, also going to be in needs more time. I think he looks good at times. I think he had some good matches in the Conference League. I don't know if he would have really helped us if he had not also gotten injured when Jackson did. It would have been kind of interesting to see if he could have stepped in and almost kind of developed on the job. I think his profile is kind of similar to Jackson as far as a striker. He is very similar in how he puts pressure on the back line, how he makes runs in behind. So I think he could develop into a very good striker, but he's definitely too young at this point. I think he needs more time. Hopefully get a loan move to either like a championship side or a lower league, Premier League side. Maybe one of those Premier League sides that's coming up. Maybe they need a striker. I think a loan move for him would be really, really good for his development. And hopefully he comes back and he's stronger and he's a little bit more mature. And who knows, he might even start challenging for the spots the season after next. So, but with that being said, final thoughts. I think overall this season was a success. I think there are still a lot of gaps that we will hopefully be filling in this transfer window. I'm also hoping, because we have a young manager, we have a young team, look at the mistakes we made this season, fix them for next season, figure out how to not make the same mistakes again next season. But I really do think next season will either sink or swim based on what we do this summer in the transfer window, because that is where we have, I think, made a lot of our mistakes, whether it's players we're bringing in that just are not good enough, players we're letting go that I think maybe should have been given some more time, or just not getting enough quality in certain positions to make sure that we are fully ready for a season with multiple competitions involved. So I know this may have been a bit of a longer video. I'll try to condense it as much as I can, because I know sometimes I can ramble on a bit. But those are all my thoughts on this season. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on the season, on Maresca, on the team? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Chelsea reviews. Also look forward to transfer talk and, of course, previews and reviews for the Club World Cup, which I will be going to the LAFC match. Super excited for that one. But until next time, I hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace out.